And then late in the game, Godwin dislocated his ankle when he was tackled by Roquan with about a minute left. Godwin will have surgery and miss the year. Todd Bowles was asked about the decision to keep him in the game late. Take a listen.
He's a player. We're trying to win the ball game. I mean, we were still down 10. We were trying to get extra points and kick another onside kick. It just happened. With Mike going down, we didn't have that many receivers left as it was, so we play what we got. It's unfortunate he got hurt. We feel bad about that, but he's a football player and he wanted to be in the game, just like Baker and everybody else wanted to be in the game.
Yeah. Any issues?
None at all. And two things. First one is, man, pro football can be a cruel game. Take the injury part out of it. Just from the way a whole, forget game, season can turn. That Tampa's up 7-0, scores, stop Baltimore, scores again. Yep. It says 13-0 on the little score bug, and there's a holding call. Questionable, one of those, you can call it, you cannot call it. Touchdown off the board. Next play, pass to Evans. Touchdown. He pulls his hamstring and drops it. And from that moment forward, you feel like that holding call, like their season turned on a Tyndall. Like Evans now done for however long, and then it leads to all the different turn of events that lead to Chris Godwin having his ankle dislocated. So I just feel sick for Tampa. On the Godwin thing, if you're down 11 or less, you're still in the game if there's more than 20 seconds left. Like they've shown they can get an onside kick. They were moving the ball. Yep. If they were down 17, then I'd say this is so silly. You're literally have no chance. But when you're down a field goal and a touchdown, you always have a chance if there's more than 10 seconds left. Especially with how good kickers are, everything. Yep. So I was shocked he was criticized for this. It was, to me, the criticism was as if it was 41-21. Right. It was 41-31. You're alive, so you have to go for it. So I thought that was unfair to Bowles.
I totally agree with you. I mean, they grilled him. If you watch the whole thing, like, do you have to protect players from themselves? When somebody asked him, I'm with Nick. They were alive. I mean, obviously, the Ravens let them back in, but at that point, you're alive. You score a touchdown, you get the onside kick, field goal. Now you go into overtime, or you got a chance even to win it. Yeah. And so what I'll say, though, is for the reporters who were criticizing Bowles, are you criticized? Why didn't you ask about Baker? All the other starters were in the game, too. It's kind of what you talk about when you go for it on fourth down.
You play the result.
Yes. Like they're asking about Godwin because he got hurt. Every other starter was on the field, too. And none of them got hurt. It's football, man. You could get hurt on any place, unfortunately. And so I got no problem with it.
All right. Well, so I want to ask specifically, how do Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans feel about that? Right? They're obviously, defending, the coaching decision. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about it? I'm curious what the true Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans feel about it. So please definitely let me know your thoughts below. But this is what I got to say. And Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans are not going to like it. First, let me start off with the positive. I think the Buccaneers are a feisty team, right? I think they are a legitimate, feisty team. They're better than what I thought they were going into this season. Right? They got some life, and I think that prior to all these injuries, they would be fighting for a playoff spot and even fighting for the division. Right? I think they could absolutely do that. But now everybody was telling me how amazing of a quarterback Baker Mayfield is. And now he's playing a great team, a team that doesn't even have a good defense, right? This show himself even highlighted how bad the defense is. Nick Wright himself, right? It's all bottom 20s for their defense. Baker Mayfield's throwing interceptions left and right. Could have had more. I think he only had 2. He could have had like 3 or 4 at one point. They were just kind of like dropped or just missed by the defense of the Ravens. And now if you're going to say, oh, well, there's injuries to the wide receivers, what do you want him to do? It's like, where was that energy versus the Eagles? When I said, hey, Buccaneers fans, it was definitely a nice win, but like it's a little inflated. The Eagles were injured really badly. And everybody was like, that's no excuses. And they went nuts. They said, Hurts is trash, couldn't find a way, blah, 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 blah. And yet Hurts was missing the entire game. The entire game. His wide receiver 1, A.J. Brown. His wide receiver 2, Devontae. Right? He was missing his best offensive lineman Lane Johnson. And then throughout the game was down his center, Cam Jurgens. Was missing defensive pieces. And yet that was like no excuses. When I said, hey, that's a little misleading of a win, let's, tap the brakes on the Bucs, Buccaneers fans ripped me. So then what's the excuse? And so you said that the Buccaneers beating the Eagles was proof that the Eagles were trash and were not a good team. So then I ask you this question. Is this proof that the Bucs aren't a good team? Is it? Is this proof that Baker Mayfield's not a good quarterback? Because you also told me that Baker Mayfield's the MVP. A lot of Buccaneers fans made the argument that he is the MVP. Well, then why didn't he step up in this game? He was down some pieces. Aren't MVPs supposed to find a way? I don't think that. I'm very consistent. I don't expect Baker Mayfield to be able to ball out under these circumstances. But I'm also not arguing that Baker Mayfield was the MVP either. So don't come at me and say that I'm a Baker Mayfield hater. I'm bringing this all up because of what a lot of Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans came at me for. And saying that I was making excuses for the Eagles, the Lions, whoever. So again, we have to be consistent. Baker Mayfield did not look good in this game. He made some nice throws. Baker Mayfield is similar to Dak in my mind, right? He's consistently pretty good, can make some great plays and some great throws and have some great moments, but also really, really bad. And so the great and the bad balance out. Baker Mayfield is definitely not a bottom quarterback in the NFL. He's definitely not a $30 million quarterback either. But Baker Mayfield thinks he's better than he is. And that's been his problem. Colin actually pointed that out years ago. And I know a lot of Baker fans don't like Colin. And Colin has turned the corner in Baker. But I think that's a very smart observation. Baker Mayfield thinks he's better than he is. So his decisions that he makes, he thinks he can make certain throws that he can't. He thinks that he can escape pressure like he is Lamar. And he is not. He doesn't understand his own limitations because he has that underdog mentality. I get it. I was born and raised with that underdog mentality. The only difference is that I was humbled a lot earlier in my life because spoiler alert, I did not become an NFL quarterback. So I was like, I learned my limitations despite me wanting them to exist. But Baker Mayfield constantly fights that. He doesn't play within himself, and that's how he gets himself into trouble. That is his kryptonite. You could say it's also what helped him get to where he is because lots of people have probably said, hey, you're down here. And he proved, no, I'm up here. But the problem is that Baker thinks he's up here. And he's not. He's here. He's a good quarterback. He is an absolute bona fide starting NFL quarterback in the NFL. No question about it. But they got rolled. This score is not what it was. And yeah, we can play this game. Because I even wrote that in my notes. The Ravens got lucky at times with the drop pass here and the holding call there and stuff like that. I get it. That's football. Honestly, it depends on the day how you want to break it down. You can really emphasize that or you could not. The obvious thing is when you look at Lamar Jackson, what he was doing offensively and everything that team was able to do, they were able to go. And the reality is that the Ravens defense is not that good. And the other reality is I said the other day that I think that Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders are better than Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Bucs. Who played a better game? The Tampa Bay Bucs versus the Ravens or the Washington Commanders versus the Ravens? I'll answer that for you. Jaden Daniels played better and the Washington Commanders played better. And yet the Buccaneers are supposed to have the better team, the better weapons. I know some of their weapons went down, but let's not act like the Commanders are stacked with weapons here. They got a 30-year-old wide receiver and like a 50-year-old tight end in Zach Ertz, who's way beyond his prime. And their running back is past his prime, and their main running back was injured and wasn't playing that game. And have a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And also, not a great defense. And yet, they made that game competitive the entire game. This game was not competitive. It just wasn't. We can point and say, oh, they were going to be up 14-0 or whatever. True. That could have been a possibility. It wasn't a questionable holding call. It was absolutely the right call. There was another penalty held against the Ravens that was truly questionable. So we can kind of do that game here. But you weren't stopping Derrick Henry. You weren't stopping Lamar Jackson. That had nothing to do with that. Could have the Ravens made it a little bit more competitive? Sure. Sure. But that defense could not stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and Flowers. I mean, they just could not. It was beast mode all over. At one point, what was it? 41 unanswered points or 35 unanswered points, whatever it ended up being. I forget exactly, 34. And then one of those a bunch of those points came when it was just a backwards pass that then, got picked up. I mean, that was just lazy football in the Ravens. That was the Ravens. The Ravens easily probably would have scored again the way how they were rolling. So again, if we want to play these shoulda, couldas, wouldas, well then add another 7 points to the Ravens, put them up 48, and take away another 7, or I think they get a 2-point conversion, so take away another 8 from the Bucs if we want to play that game, right? Let's be serious here. So I know I'm not going to be winning many Buccaneers fans right now, but we got to be consistent. If you want to say no excuses for the Philadelphia Eagles with their injuries versus the Buccaneers, then no excuses for Baker Mayfield and their injuries versus the Ravens. And if you want to say, well, the Ravens are this great team, well, you said the Buccaneers are this great team. We got to be consistent. Things got to add up. It doesn't have to always exactly be 1 + 1 = 2, because this is sports. It's a science. It's 1 + 1 = a cursive 2, a fancy 2. But it still has to add up. We still have to have some sort of consistency here. So the reality is this. Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback, and the Buccaneers are a pretty good team. They're not great. They're not elite. Baker Mayfield's not great, and Baker Mayfield's not elite. And so now having some of these injuries, yeah, there's going to be a pretty steep fall from the Buccaneers. For sure. And it's a shame because if the Buccaneers were fully healthy, I think they probably could have maybe beaten the Chiefs. I think that would have been a feisty, pretty interesting game. Now that feels like that game is ruined. Now best case scenario for the Bucs are honestly that they kind of keep losing and get good draft. Because it's like, what are you expecting to do this season? I can't imagine much, quite honestly. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? What do you think about playing the starters late? What do you think about their season prospects now? How Baker Mayfield played? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.